I'm looking at Matt, and I could tell he
What?
wasn't. I could tell he wasn't
I
saying
didn't
something.
say anything this
You
time.
didn't. You actually, you were very good. Yeah, you're like a well-trained.
You're actually living rent-free in Bren's head, though, because he still beefed his own intro because he was thinking about you interrupted.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't Matt that beefed my intro. That was. I would have done it anyway.
No,
even
he
without
was
Matt
trying
there.
to call me out when I wasn't doing shit.
Yeah. Welcome to Plat Chat episode. What is it? 55. That's right.
55, sure.
Well done, everybody at home. Yeah. This is the post grand finals episode. I feel out of sorts. I woke up today at 5 o'clock in the morning. I've been trying to slowly adjust my sleep schedule, as we all have, and we didn't know if this episode was going to get recorded, did we?
Well, we did. I mean, we knew it was going to get recorded. We just didn't know when.
We didn't know.
I mean, we knew we were going to do an episode on the grand finals this week. We did know that. But we did not.
You guys
know.
are lucky to be getting this episode.
Yep.
What?
I mean, sure. We're also lucky to make this episode.
What methods have you guys been doing to fix your sleep?
An easy one. So basically what I did is I ended the broadcast at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I slept from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I got up, I streamed for whatever reason. I felt like compelled to turn my stream on. I streamed for 3 hours till 4. I laid in bed from like 4 to like 7, slept from 7 to midnight, came back into my room. I played like 2 games of Valorant. Then I I took down everything, like the whole virtual set. And then 4 in the morning, I went to sleep and I woke up at 10 a.m. the next day and I've been fine.
So
You said that was a simple method. I mean, there were so many convoluted steps to that.
What was convoluted about it?
Why'd you lay in bed from 4 till 7? Not
Because I
sleep?
wanted because I wanted to stay up as long as possible. So
you did it in bed? You went to bed to stay up extra long?
Yeah, I did.
I don't know about you
mental
guys.
toughness to just fight through the bed
I
sleepy
have been
stage.
struggling.
Well,
I've been struggling so
tougher.
much. I woke up today at 5 a.m. Yesterday I woke up at midnight. The day before that I woke up at like 6 p.m.
What time are you going to bed?
Issue.
Huh?
What time are you going to bed? Like, how are you just not able to sleep?
I went to bed at 8 p.m. Last night.
Mm.
And you woke up at 5. Yeah, that's See,
Were you
Yeah.
just not able to like stay in bed for a few more hours? Like if you got out of bed at like 8 a.m., that would have been fine.
Well, I woke up at 1 a.m. and I was wide awake. So I took I took some melatonin and decided to knock myself out again, and now I feel really out of sorts.
When I wake up in the morning, I can just choose to go back to sleep.
Yeah,
like I never wake up and I'm like, boom, I'm awake. I have to actively get myself out of bed. It's perfect for these situations.
The son of Palpatine, is that your Jedi power?
Well,
that was actually mine
say,
and Costa's like big difference this week. Costa was just like, yeah, I felt great. You know, I went to bed at like 4 p.m. and like, but I went to bed at like noon and woke up at like 9 p.m. I feel great. And I was like, I'm on 5 hours of sleep. What the fuck's happening this week? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And we're just polar opposites.
I asked one of my friends for advice on how to like effectively fix your sleep. And one of the things they recommended actually was to go camping outside, like camping outside.
The sunset
because the daylight being out in the sun all the time would slowly fix your schedule, where basically your body would get more tired during the night. Do you know what I mean? Like your rhythmic biological cycle.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say yes, I do, because I just don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. So I went out into the forest for like at least a couple of days.
A few days. It's been a few days.
I mean, it has been a few days since the
You've
finals.
been in the forest since the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Welcome back to society.
Yeah.
And what did you do in the forest?
Well, I went out into the forest, and obviously we came very well prepared. We bought a bunch of food. I say we, it was just me. Went into the forest alone.
Gotta stay socially distanced.
Yeah, you gotta stay social distanced. And I bought enough supplies. I bought enough beef jerky for at least a week. and a bunch of distilled water, which you're not supposed to drink, but I bought it anyway. You're not supposed to drink distilled water, Matt.
No, you're not.
Sure, I don't drink water.
Wait,
I just drink
what's
coffee.
distilled water?
Distilled water is like it actually actively removes minerals from your body.
Yeah,
when you drink
it's
Oh.
utterly pure water.
Do they sell it?
You're not supposed to drink it, but
I mean,
I bought it
they sell
anyway.
for like science and stuff.
I ran
Or
into
to using cars.
Oh, wait.
Let Bren talk
yeah,
about
I
what
ran into a couple of
happened.
issues when I was out there in the forest because
It's horrible.
Well, issue number one was that COVID has caused the bears to return to California. So they stole all of my beef jerky out the back of the car. Now, you might be wondering, how did they open the back of the car? Well, bears are very, very smart, quite intelligent animals. So I immediately ran into a problem. Problem number one, no food. Problem number two, water was useless. It was actively causing me to become dehydrated. I mean, just silliness all around. And I thought, well, this is it. You lived a long life. You're 24, but this is how you're going to die.
God, that would have been terrible.
And as I was accepting my fate, staring up at the night sky, still sleep deprived and unable to fall asleep, I realized, hang on. What do they always say to you when you're in these survival scenarios? What do they always say? The one thing they always say.
You better have T-Mobile 5G.
Fucking damn right, man. They always say if you've got T-Mobile's 5G network, you know you're going to be safe when you're trapped in the wilderness with no food or water. So that's what I did. Pulled out my phone, chucked it up, and I was like, oh, wait, there it is. Oh, up. 5G bars. Go on then. So with 5G coverage in all 50 states, T-Mobile's got the America's largest 5G network. And even better, no other 5G signal goes farther to bring you closer to the Overwatch League and keep you connected to the game. So rank up and take your wireless game to the next level with T-Mobile. Visit T-Mobile.com today so that you won't be stranded into the forest with no food or water. Now, I could continue the story, but I'm imagining at least at this point, you're going to be wanting to hear about the Overwatch League, you know, the grand finals, all that thing. What?
Did you just malfunction?
Dude, I am not functioning as a human currently, so it's a miracle we're even recording this episode. You best be grateful, you little shits.
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're gonna get through this.
Just
It's
like
gonna be
usual, me and Josh
weird
will be
episode.
the
Let's talk
beacons
about
of hope.
Overwatch.
Oh yeah. You and
Community.
Josh. Yeah, you know we're gonna get into this. Thank you so much, Matt, for your awesome analysis in last week's episode. Really,
Let's start with
truly accurate. You know, we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
quarterfinals. The beginning, the
Quarterfinals.
introduction to any good story starts with Seoul versus San Francisco Shock. This was, I believe, the first match of the quarterfinals that we witnessed.
Yep.
Who would have known that it was going to be the grand finals in this moment? I mean, none of us did. None of us did.
What a fantastic precursor for the entire weekend. Like, it began as it ended, but also it started out and everyone assumed Seoul would be the weakest of the four teams. And we kind of thought that the match would be a bit of a roll. I think we predicted a 3-1.
We didn't talk about it at all. We just thought
Yeah,
this match was going to be a roll.
3-1.
Well, we did a little bit, yeah, but we just I think we all just kind of assumed that Seoul Dynasty were a good team, but the longer the other teams had to play hog, the more the gap would increase, basically.
So the question here becomes: how much clout do I try to claim? Because it
Go on,
wasn't like really
suckle
set in
all the clout.
stone.
Oh, come on.
It was
now.
kind of just like theoretical clout. It wasn't really,
What do
like
you
set
mean?
in stone.
You can't do this forever. So this is what Johnny does. He makes a.
I am right, and then I claim clout for what I was
He
right
makes
about.
a bold
That's
claim,
what I do.
right? And then when it doesn't work out, he tries to pander. Like, oh, everybody was being so mean to me because I had this hot take and it didn't work out. Like, I don't get it. And then when he's right, then he wants to claim the clout. Can't
So
work
I'm
like that.
claiming clout.
But
Yes.
Will,
The
what do
next
you
time
mean
you make
claiming
just some
clout?
I don't know. He had Seoul Dynasty not being the worst team, which I guess was a hot take.
Do you mean claiming the clout from your bracket prediction like 3 months ago?
Yeah.
That's just nonsense.
I have for some time said that I think Fusion would be the worst team at the.
What?
When did
You
that
did
was
not say
not
that last
uttered
week.
at all last week.
I was hinting towards it. I was hinting towards
Come
it.
on, bro. Yo, mute his mic, Hurt. Get this guy out of here, bro.
I will say, this reminds me of, like, did you see that tweet from Hex from April where he said Seoul Dynasty are going to
That
win
was
the
a
grand
good one,
finals?
though.
If you go
Yeah.
back through all of Hex's tweets, you'll actually see that he did that for all 20 teams. But just nobody noticed because nobody checks his Twitter. But
That's incredible.
yeah. I mean, he almost came close, didn't he? He was like, what? He was one off. I will say, I will claim my clout though for this moment. You remember we had to do the grand finals predictions of what we thought who was going to win?
Mm-hmm.
Teams. I said what team was going to win, and I said the scoreline.
It's true.
Sure.
Has nothing to do with the quarterfinals, Seoul versus.
No, it doesn't. No, but this
Seoul
match,
versus San Francisco,
this match was a lovely precursor that we didn't really expect.
And what's funny is this match went a lot like how the finals went, in the sense that like it was shock early, then Seoul came alive, and then like the shock at the end, where I think what they did this weekend, Seoul Dynasty, I think is extremely impressive. I think the players and the fans of them should be extremely proud. What I think they threw a lot of teams off guard was just like the way that Gesture played Roadhog. Like it wasn't kind of like an in-your-face kind of like take this type of space approach. Like he always would just kind of like flank and take these off angles, but like hold on to Hook. So you were always like kind of in the corner of your eye, like looking around, like where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And just opened up so much space that way for Profit and Fitz. Also, I thought we didn't talk about it a ton, but like Marvel being able to play Sigma, and Sigma kind of being like the off tank of choice, pretty much puts him back on a hero he's extremely good on last year.
Remember back in the playoffs though, like before, like when the teams were qualifying, like Seoul were one of the only teams that were playing like this Hog Sigma, and we were trying to theorize at the time, why the fuck are they playing Sigma over like Diva or Zarya, you know? Like why Sigma? Because I mean at the time we didn't really come to any logical conclusion. We were just like, I don't know, they must just prefer it for one reason or another. But
the only thing they missed this weekend, Saul, was having like a top flight like Zenyatta player. I feel like they missed out on that. The
cool shit about Seoul though, Matt, was that they got around that with just their own playstyle, where they just were investing nano boosts onto Gesture, and the Bionades were their big win cons. You know, that's how they got around it. It was cool to see. Like when they were punishing teams with the nano boost when other teams tried to punish Gesture.
But they kind of give themselves like that, just like one win con with like the biotic grenades. So like when they didn't, like it was really apparent when the Ana wasn't working out, right? And they really just kind of had no space to move off of it. I also think Hanzo becoming extremely like prevalent definitely paid off for Seoul Dynasty over the course of the weekend. Profit is a really, really strong Hanzo player.
I'm going to go back to the Marvel discussion for a second, though, because I saw a tweet from Dream as well, where he was saying that it was very fortunate that Seoul got the heroes that they're like comfort picks for their tank line, when he had considered their tank line to be a large problem. I mean, for starters, a Gesture on the Hog, like that's a weird comfort pick, but yeah, I suppose Gesture isn't on the Rhine. That's the only hero that he looks to be a little weak on. But Marvel, I think, is... he's obviously Sigma is his main hero, but the fact that he was able to play the ball to a really high level in these compositions as well is something that's gone, I think, completely under the radar. Like this guy, we've criticized him all season long for not really being like they put him in a position where he has to play the off tanks, but he's not a diva player, and he hasn't played like Zarya to a super high level either. But here he was playing not just his comfort hero Sigma, but he was also playing the ball in like a really smart way, being able to make a lot of space for Gesture to be able to play. It wasn't as good as some of the other ball players like Smurf, for example, or who else played it really well? Stand One, actually, when the way that they were syncing it up. But it was still nice to see from Marvel, showing that he has more depth in his hero pool than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting how we go back to Hollywood in the grand finals, because Hollywood in this series was so indicative of the team's different styles. Like we mentioned, like Matt mentioned, the Zenyatas was really important. Violet being able to play Zenyatta on Hollywood in this series like made such a massive difference, because it was so hard for Seoul to walk up or gain any space, because Gesture essentially had to either play so far behind the enemy team that he really couldn't flank, and he just didn't get any value because Violet was playing such a good Zenyatta. And then in the finals as well, we saw in Hollywood that like Seoul really couldn't play around San Francisco's playstyle on this map, and it became crucial in this map, but also in the grand finals. So I think it's awesome how the two teams' playstyles and compositions really was highlighted the most on Hollywood, in my opinion, and how Seoul couldn't adapt because they were playing the Ana. You can't really walk up, like the extra healing doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
And not deciding not to commit at all to like a wrecking ball tracer composition and abandoning the double sniper. Just kind of showcase as well that Seoul were super comfortable playing double sniper, and that was their composition of choice.
I think we should move on to the other quarterfinals because we're getting into territory where we are. I think we're just close to.
It's also weird because the first match is the finals as well. So it's
Well,
kind
there was just before we move on though, the second half of this series had a Havana map that was really interesting. We went over to Havana, and when I was watching this live with Bren, I think you were doing a companion stream. I think we were watching with Bren and Mitch, and we asked Mitch to look at some stats because his IP is whitelisted to be able to look at stats halfway through the match, and I'm too lazy to do that, so I was asking him to check in instead. And Ants only had one final blow on defense, and it wasn't a scoped kill at all. And it seemed like Ants was having very little impact in the fight. And so when I watched that live, I was like, oh god, is Ants choking? Like it's his first finals appearance. He's a rookie player. You don't really expect it of him because he's so fantastically skilled. But at the end of the day, the guy doesn't really have that much experience. I thought it might be a bit of a choke coming through from him. I went and did a VOD review of that game just before the finals happened. I mean, Ants also had some weird moments like this shit as well, where he's like flanking around the side. And I do think Ants choked a little bit, but also the Shock played this map positionally super poorly with their double sniper. And I think that they were actively learning how to play double sniper comps while the finals were going on. Like the positions of the map that they're fighting for got actively improved over the course of the entirety of the grand finals. And I think they clearly looked like a team that was still making mistakes and developing. Although they won all of their series and they haven't lost a match in the playoffs, they weren't head and shoulders above the competition. Like they were still adapting on the fly and like improving their gameplay as they went along. It wasn't like Striker could just go on Tracer and carry everything. They still were figuring stuff out.
You remember the post-match interview with Ons after this one as well, where he basically ended up saying, I can't remember how the question was posed to him by Danny, but the answer was that he does get nervous with these matches.
Yeah.
Like it's obviously a normal part of it, which probably played into it. But God Almighty, I remember these moments of Prophet just fucking, like actually just fucking.
But also look how far forwards. Like Seoul played the double sniper better on a lot of these maps. Like especially on Escort, I think this is one of the big reasons why we'll talk about this at some point. I'm sure the San Francisco Shock only won control and hybrid maps throughout the entirety of the the whole tournament, as in the Overwatch League, but the grand finals, the final weekend. And I think one of the biggest reasons for that is that teams like the Seoul Dynasty are so much better at getting their double snipers into aggressive positions on Escort, which is like a map where you're constantly, the territory is changing, right? Like you're always pushing forwards on the map when you're the attackers, or you're always having to fight for position as the defenders. And Prophet and Fitz were so much better at doing that than Ants and Striker were.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Maybe that the Shock were more suited towards. Do you want to say something, Matt?
Yeah, it's just I think going back to some of the stuff you were mentioning with Ants, like just kind of like when you were mentioning, like kind of gets nervous for some of these games. Like just imagine the position this guy was put in at the beginning of the season. Like we all expected him not to really play that much, right? We kind of thought it was like more of like a streamer type, like almost like we were kind of talking to like a Chipsa type of move, right?
No, it wasn't a Chipsa move, but he was a Widowmaker specialist.
Yeah, but we weren't kind of considering like he was going to play most of the year. Like we were never talking about that.
It was always a specialist position. I don't know where you're getting Chipsa from.
I think I remember Johnny said that.
What? What the fuck? You're just making shit up.
No. Go back and listen to the episodes. But for him,
viewers, that's not true.
For him to
Matt's just making shit up again.
For him to play this well with all of the pressure, and then also like this is a team going for back to back in a way, like his spot in the lineup like kind of opens up for even more play when like Sinatra's gone.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just like this is a guy who steps into a team who's already won. They look so dominant. The MVP who everybody loves leaves, and then now you're just kind of like, hey, you know what? You want to play some more heroes outside of the Widowmaker? Like, we'd love for you to do that. Like, and he delivered like in a huge way throughout the whole year. I think
really
the way he, I also think the only way he kind of plays this well is just because of the shock organization and like all the things that they put around and enable the players to get the best out of them.
They are fantastic at getting the absolute most out of their players.
Yes.
I mean, clearly you need to be skilled and you need to like have that potential, which Ants absolutely does. And the guy grinded his ass off, but no better team that you could join for fulfilling that potential.
Yes.
Well, what's so incredible is that Ans was just popping off on a crucial role for this team, and one could argue that like he wasn't even like. I mean, there were like maybe 2 players ahead of him that were like more important. Like you have Striker, that's probably a higher priority. You have Violet on the Zenyatta, which is probably higher priority, and like incredible players on so many other positions that like ultimately, I mean, he's still right to be nervous, but like people don't look at Ans and be like, oh yeah, he's the number 1 target. And that's, I mean, just incredible when you reflect on the entirety of the San Francisco Shock roster. That like you can have such an impactful player on the Widowmaker role, and he's arguably not like public enemy number 1 for some of these teams, which is insane.
Yeah, it
when
really
you look
is.
at his stats.
Did you guys see the post on the competitive Overwatch subreddit where someone had translated or at least transcribed some of Ants' stream after the finals, where he was talking about having spent the entire season for like 5 months being incredibly depressed as well. Yeah. He said that he said he'd spent the season, the 5 months under like immense pressure as a rookie member of the San Francisco Shock because they were such a good team, and he was really depressed and went over to Korea to see a doctor about it and got some medication for it as well. And said there was some days where it was just overwhelming and he just couldn't play scrims. He was just breaking down, but he managed to kind of work through it all. And he said he's going to take a bit of a break from the stream and kind of get back into it. Yeah, this is the post here. Yep. I can't verify the exact accuracy of it, but it seems fairly reasonable from what other people are commenting as well. And I mean, that just makes things even more impressive, right? Like the guy was able to go through all of this and he was so committed to it that he was kind of keeping on through. Like, I'm sure that the team was aware of this and being able to support him emotionally, even if they didn't realize the full extent of it. You've obviously got to take care of yourself first, but it just makes his achievement even more impressive.
And I think Johnny kind of knows as well. It's like when you're a professional player, like a lot of times you're kind of like focused on obviously winning, but then a lot of your focus is also just kind of remaining a professional player. Like you don't really get that many chances at it, and the chances you get directly affect like whether you have another shot.
It goes down real fast.
a lot of players don't get like a second or third chance, right? So to come in and be a rookie on a team that it's expected to do this well, like you're held to a way higher standard across the team, the league, the fans. It's a lot. Also on top of trying to stream, entertain, like there's it's not easy. It's not easy.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the Philly Shanghai match.
They played?
They did play.
When was this match?
One team played.
I mean, we can start here talking about the immense disappointment that Philly was.
Yeah.
Because it's as good a place as any to talk about it.
And I can't believe we didn't see this coming in some sense, though. Like, I feel so mad that you guys talked me into believing in the Philadelphia Fusion.
This is a cool storyline.
It was, but when you look in hindsight, like what we knew where the meta was going. We said in last week's episode that we were very certain it was heading in a Hog is going to be your tank line with somebody else, probably the Sigma, and then it's going to be like a long-range hit scan and a tracer. Now, we didn't quite see the double sniper thing coming as well, but it's a very similar like adaptation. And then the backline is, you know, your Mercy and your Ana, or your Mercy and your Zen. Like we knew that was going to be the meta, and we knew that like Carpe and Hisu doesn't really match up to these other guys when it comes to those kind of performances, and yet for some reason I still believed in them. Like, how does that make sense? They couldn't play the comp that they wanted to play.
Consistent all year long, and even when the meta wasn't great for them all year long, at times they still looked good.
No, it's because they didn't play like incredible top teams all the time. They beat Shock once in a meta that was unrelated to this. I think maybe I put too much stock in like the Philadelphia Fusion tanks to like, perhaps lift up players like Hisu a little bit. Hisu did have some decent performances, specifically here on Busan.
Good,
I think he started off pretty good, but then as the series went on, like they just weren't the same caliber. And I highlighted some of the things last episode about they beat Gladiators and Valiant with the Sombra Reaper composition. They counter-stratted the Washington Justice, which they looked really good in that series. But we had our concerns going into this tournament, but I think ultimately it comes back to the consistency this year. I mean, they made the finals of 2 stage finals. Like you can't dismiss that just outright.
Well,
I feel horrible for them because I mean, people probably tune in and they kind of like associate that play with how they played the whole year, and like I kind of almost felt the worst for like Sato. Like Sato's been like really strong the entire year.
Yeah,
like,
my God, people were calling for him to be cut at the end of these finals. I'm like,
like, are you stupid?
Yeah,
Philly fans are really emotional.
If Sato was cut, he'd start on like every other team that wasn't here. And even some of these teams would probably consider starting them in some situations. Yeah. Like, I mean,
Sato and Dragons, are you kidding me? I'd probably want that more than Fearless.
Yeah.
I think the Philadelphia Fusion, though, there's a lot of things that you can dig into in terms of like why they didn't do so well. I think the obvious one, the like thing that everything else stems down from, is that the meta kind of got away from them, right? Like what they wanted to do in the meta was play the Sombra with Hisu, play the dive style. Like they were the best team in the world at playing that kind of style. Yes. But it seems like these better teams were able to play the Hog composition. Specifically, I would imagine like Hog Ball was really difficult to play that kind of thing into. And obviously the Justice can't play a different style, so they just got rolled by the Sombra Reaper kind of stuff. But against these guys, they must have tried it, right? Like this is the stuff that happens during scrim that you don't see.
How much, like a large part of it, we know that we knew that Philly was capable. I think of if they wanted to play like the double sniper stuff, I think they could go toe to toe with a lot of the teams in the Final Four, but for whatever reason. I do wonder as well, though, coming into this, like how much of it is mentality. We'll never know until we actually talk to the teams and players. Yeah. But it can be a huge difference maker, I think, if you fucking quarantine in another country, fly out 14 hours, and then you just immediately, things don't go as planned. Like the composition you've been playing and putting time into isn't the dominant one. The meta shifts away from you a little bit. Like all those things can add up and accumulate over the course of that period and the lead up before that first match, until eventually you wouldn't have confidence in your own play.
I feel like this team, though, like, I was talking on my stream about it, and they were like, well, what does Philly do? And I'm like, you don't really see anywhere they can kind of upgrade in terms of players, right? Maybe you add a Mercy player, but even then, Johnny, right? I feel like they mismanaged the DPS players the entire year. Like nobody outside of like Hisu and Ivy, I think, like for Carpe specifically, like there was never like you never felt like he kind of had like a solidified place outside of like the Ash types of things. And then just kind of, I feel like throwing him in here on Hanzo towards the end, like it was kind of ugly.
Well, Carpe played a lot of the Torb and the McCree early on in the season. I think people forget about that.
I think Carpe played a lot. Rotations all year.
Towards the second half of the season, like later half though, he wasn't in like a lot.
Because the meta was like Sombra Genji.
But even then, a little bit before that,
Reaper as well. I think though that makes sense. Like I think the trap for Philly is trying to run Carpe too much. I think that Carpe should just be rotated like any of your other players. I actually dislike that they tried to force him in these playoffs onto the Hanzo. Now, I know that Carpe says Hanzo is his best hero. Man, I ain't never seen Carpe play the Hanzo like he plays some of these other heroes. it's
You're
nonsense to me that
becoming-
fans bring
Did
up.
we
that as
ever-
a fact.
Sorry, you're
Did we ever
becoming
see
so
him play?
Americanized.
Did we ever see
Man, I
Carpe
ain't never
play?
seen Carpe play that.
When was the
I've
last
been
time
here
we
for
saw
too
him play
long.
Widow?
When was it? What? The last time?
He didn't play Widow at all in the grand finals, right?
He played
I don't
some
think so.
Tracer and got boomed.
He played
in the
Tracer,
end,
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but, like,
The thing is,
I think in
yeah.
hindsight, I would just want to get this in. I think in hindsight, I think the Fusion will have to wonder if bringing EQO would have made a difference to this tournament.
I also don't really buy into that as well, though, because Ivy is a great Hanzo.
Right. I don't know why they didn't try Carpe on the Widow and Ivy on the Hanzo.
They did try that at some, well, no, they tried Hisu and Ivy.
They
but
tried Hisu and Ivy.
the thing is, when you adapt halfway through a tournament,
Yeah.
you're not gonna take the guy that's been practicing all the Widow off and just put Carpe in, who's been
Right.
practicing Hanzo and Tracer. And that doesn't make sense, right? Like, even though historically Carpe has been great on Widowmaker, if he's not hot, if he hasn't been practicing it, if he hasn't been actually working with the team in scrims and figuring out like where he should be holding and how the team rotates around him, well, now you're just prioritizing one guy's individual ability to click on heads above any kind of practice that you've done with the team. It doesn't make sense.
I think I remember Soon saying at some point, like a year or two ago, that like he considered Tracer and Widowmaker and McCree to be such vastly different heroes in terms of aim practice that it's really hard to be like elite at both of them
Yeah.
at the same time. Because you have
Sure.
to like pick one. If you want to be the best at either of them, you have to pick one of them and just like grind it out. Because it's so hard to be top tier at both of them at the same time.
I also hate the idea of the fans saying that that Hisu was the problem. I think this was a large narrative just after they'd won, and I checked the subreddit this morning actually, just to see if there was any like big things that the fans were talking about that we should discuss on the podcast. And one of the most upvoted things on the subreddit this morning was Wolf talking about Carpe's performance. And I talked about it a bit on my companion stream as well, where I said that I thought Hisu actually performed better than Carpe did across the grand finals. And that Carpe's playstyle is like super individualistic and not synced up with the rest of his team, and has been for like the last 3 years. And actually that is hurting them more than the like individual lack of ability on Hisu or something. And a lot of the comments now on the subreddit are agreeing with that kind of thing. Like the fan consensus is starting to swing the other way, whereas it previously was like Carpe's a god, you can't not run him, like Hisu's the problem, etc., etc. That was the narrative for the entirety of this year, basically. And now it's starting to swing the other way, perhaps too far the other way as well.
Yeah,
because that's the way that it always happens, where people are like, oh, okay, well, maybe, Carpe's play style is actually hurting them in some of these situations.
It's an
when I watch
outdated
Carpe play
playstyle.
Tracer, I definitely think that it's like actively hurting them in some ways.
Yeah, going for it reminds me of a lot of the individual plays that you see from Carpe it's almost like ego driven. Do you know what I mean? In terms of trying to take on too much. He just
believes he's so good.
Trying to take on too much
can
of the
roll
weight
D6.
of responsibilities of your team, which is a classic thing that DPS players can do, or just any player does, is where they try and take on way too much if things aren't going their way, right? And you see that as a series progressed, as it looked more and more likely that Fusion were just going to bottom out, the riskier and riskier some of the individual players got. And it got to the point where I remember actively we were watching Josh and we were just like, what the fuck is Carpe doing? He's feeding. Like, he's just dying.
Because when things get sticky, the whole of the Philadelphia Fusion team tries to make individual plays rather than tighten their teamwork or change the strategy. It's a team culture thing, and I don't think all of it comes from Carpe either.
No.
But some of it certainly does, because he's your star player and he's who the team is built around.
They fall back to hero plays.
Yeah.
Somebody try to win the game. What's interesting? Sorry.
I want to continue talking about that if you're going to move on.
I was actually trying to parse through the stats to see how much Widow Hisu played in the regular season.
Okay, well, you can say that later. I think I want to play like devil's advocate here too, though, because I think sometimes when you find yourself in these scenarios, and I'd love to like hear like Christopher's opinion on this and if he had any insights and like what they said and stuff, but like, yeah, this is Fusion's playstyle sometimes to rely on hero plays. But at the same time, sometimes when you're in these scenarios, you need to sort of like drive yourself into a very playmaking play style, because otherwise you'll fall back and not go for plays at all, and you get into like drive yourself into a hole where you're not making plays, and the enemy team is just like toying with you and just playing around you. So I could see maybe, I mean, I don't know what the coaching staff said, but I could see this sort of being encouraged just to try to get the players to snap out of like overthinking or overanalyzing or playing cautiously, because sometimes you need that. I don't know if that was said or not, but
Sure, but I think they go too far that way, right?
Yeah.
Like I can see the balance. You can't just play scared in a game. Like if you're losing, you still have to have the confidence to be able to go for your own stuff. But they seem to like lose any sense of what
Teamwork?
teamwork and strategy and that coordination,
yeah,
and they go
that
the
I
other
can
way.
agree with.
Now, I also think though that the problem with Philadelphia from like the big picture point of view was not any individual player. Like if Carpe had a god tier performance, they probably still would have lost.
They would be fun, but they would have lost still. But they probably would have. I mean, what's the difference between third and fourth at that point, right?
Well, I don't even think they would have won it
probably don't
either
even
of the
beat that,
games though.
though.
Like they got blown out here. When you get blown out, it's very rarely one person's fault. I think they just didn't really get how this meta worked. Like the way their tank line was playing and the positions that they were taking and the space that they had on the map and how they were working with like the double snipers taking angles and the tanks working on the floor was just,
Oh my god, did you?
it was so much worse than all of the other teams in terms of their understanding.
Was that the one that I casted a game? I think it was the next Philly game. We can talk about it. That was just like absolutely tragic. But something that I thought was interesting is that during the entire regular season, we saw Hisu play the Widow for 20 minutes. And they played Carpe on the Widow for about an hour and 35 total game minutes. Maybe
I
they
think it was a
valued
meta
having the
mismatch.
Hanzo and the Tracer.
Yeah, I mean, you play Hanzo and Tracer in this meta, so they just thought that Carpe was the best Hanzo Tracer player that they had.
Right.
I mean, potentially they should have, like, if they could wind back time, maybe on Ivy on that role and Carpe on the Widowmaker, maybe that would have made somewhat of a difference. But I still don't think
Widow Ash
power difference. Like, I think the DPS didn't look great, but it's about how the team's like functioning as a unit, and they just didn't get this meta the same as.
It's not an 0-6 difference to winning difference.
Yeah, like some of the times where I think you can very clearly see this as a viewer, where you don't have to look at the play style, you don't have to think too deeply about the game, just look at the team comps. Like sometimes they're attacking and they're running the Ana and double sniper to attack into a team that's running Zen double sniper, where you would get much more value out of running a Tracer and a Zen there, where you can use the Tracer to put some pressure on the snipers and actually get space, or you can use your Zen to be able to put pressure on the tank line and this kind of stuff. Like they just didn't really have the awareness of what swaps to make, and if you want to dig even deeper, like the positionings to take and the coordination on the tanks and the DPS.
Yeah. Do we want to move on? Because I want to have some meta discussions about Fusion later, but I feel like we can talk about that in the last match.
Well, we can keep the conversation about Fusion going because we can talk about their lower bracket game where they got knocked down here. They played against Seoul. And this was really the last chance. And to be fair, I think at this point we still had a lot of hope in Philly because we kept referring back to the examples of when they've adapted in a short amount of time. They've only had very little prep time and still being able to battle back. And we thought that they'd be capable of doing it. They proved it all season long, but unfortunately, not to be.
I casted this one.
Yeah.
I knew it was over after the first Seoul push on Kings Row. Not even the whole thing. Just point A. The fact that like the Fusion came out with like zero kind of like sense of urgency, or really kind of seemed on map 1, and then
they looked bad on Busan.
Yeah, and then they did the same thing that Paris did against Washington. They kind of conceded they couldn't play it, and then they made changes. They brought in Poco to play instead of Sato, and then they brought in Ivy. Huh?
I can respect those massive adjustments that they made.
They had to, right?
Yeah, you got to make a Hail Mary play.
We weren't going to win the other way. But so this push was just it was just so tragic from Philly. Like at one point, Gesture just walks up to the high ground, pushes Poco all the way back. Hisu leaves up in top, and he just stands back here. At one point, Gesture just pushes him all the way out, and they have no control over the point. Like the Widow has zero sight lines whatsoever.
Yeah. It's the slow play that I think is like, if you want one way to sum up why Philly were bad here, though, it's that the slow tactical play style, it just ain't Philly. It just isn't Philly. Like Philly want to be fast. They want to get in your face. They want to use their individual ability to overpower you. And this was a slow paced meta. It was a slow meta about map control and taking angles. And that's not them.
Because when the game gets faster, they can force some of those 1v1 hero type of plays because it becomes a little bit messier, right? There are players all over the place. Like, you know, it becomes a little bit more chaotic. When it's so slow like this, Josh, like you mentioned, they have to play a little bit more structured and around each other. And I don't know, maybe sometimes players get a little antsy, like they're just trying to make something happen. Like
the Resurrect slows the game down as well, quite tremendously.
Yeah.
I think fans will look at the 2018 Grand Finals and be like, well, you know, they're playing double sniper there too. But I think the difference is, in 2018, you could still go for plays because you had Orisa's halt. So you would combo halt with like Dragon Strike and you would combo halt with Rogue hooks and stuff like that. So you could make proactive, aggressive plays. Whereas in this meta, you play like a Roadhog and a Sigma. It's way harder to like set the tempo in the front line and be proactive about it.
Also, the league's way different.
Yeah, and the league is way better as well right now. Like Carpe and EQO was so good compared to their opponent.
Think about year one. If I told you that, you know, a year and a half or 2 years from now, there would be a team that had Striker on it that didn't play him on Widowmaker because there was a better option. Like, just think about how you would have just been like, shut the fuck up. Like, you're just dumb. Like, there's no way. Like, the league, I think, has just gotten so much better in terms of talent, like top to bottom. I mean, think about how many new players are in the league, right? It's just, I think you kind of look back and it's like, okay, yeah, you had a chance. Like, I mean, you may even kind of look back as Philly
this
and
fight
be like,
was fucking horrible.
Oh my god!
Profit, when Profit jumped off the map,
the
and they still got baited in when they tried to punish it. And Seoul just ate them up. Like I remember watching this and I was like, "Oh my god, Profit ran off the map. Here's an opening for Philly." And they just they didn't know how to grasp.
I mean,
you
know, it's bad when the opening for the other team is one person just jumping off the map for the opponent.
Again, though, it's like that fight again was an example though of the DPS on the Seoul Dynasty outperforming. Like, even though Profit throws himself off the map, they get a headshot kill immediately onto Ivy, and then Funny Astro's just kind of left in a poor position. And it's like Philly, once you get to these situations where Philly are playing against teams where the individual talent is as good as they are, because even though Philly are a super team, they're not head and shoulders above the rest of the league in terms of their individual play. So once you get like pound for pound equivalent with them, Philly don't really have the same strategy and or like they need a firepower advantage to be able to win. I think when you play their play style.
When we casted it, I think we put a lot of like emphasis on like how they were losing the DPS battle, and you know, people were kind of tweeting, I think, like Mitch, like, well, what about the rest of the team? Like the rest of the team's not really even given it. Like, when you play like double sniper and you're consistently down a player at the beginning, there's nothing that Alarm or Funny Astro or Fury can do to change the tides of this that are going to win those fights and win the game. Like, it's
I think another aspect that people fail to realize with this is that if you have a better Roadhog player or Roadhog player, the really cool thing about watching Seoul play is that when Gesture gets a hook and a kill in, it's very hard to get that res off on the player they've just killed, comparatively to like Philly, where you would expect them maybe like the best chance that they have in winning some sort of matchup would be with the snipers, and it's so much easier to get a resurrect off to try and just completely mitigate whatever they've just achieved. You don't get that when Soul's playing, like when Gesture's fucking throwing out these ridiculous hooks and he's pulling them into the enemy's front line. Like, you're not going to be able to resurrect that.
Well, what do you want some of these players to do on Philly? You have the worst Roadhog, and then you arguably have the worst, I mean, I think in this series for sure, the worst double sniper. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
I think is that accurate? They had the worst hog and the worst double sniper. I mean, I haven't really thought about it.
Gesture was better than either Sato or Poco the whole series.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like across the top 4 teams, you know.
I was saying in this matchup. I was saying in this matchup, they
But
did.
it might be true across all of the top
Yeah,
four
I think it
teams
might
as
be
well,
true
right?
across all.
Oh, it might be true
Depends on
against
stand
all
one
top
versus
4,
Seoul.
yeah.
Yeah. And
I
that
think-
that to me is like where I was hoping that Sado and Fury would actually be one of the better tank lines. Because we hadn't really
That's
seen
what I
them
thought too.
play. I was hoping that Sado and Fury would actually be the difference maker, like the way that they would
Yes.
control the map and the way that they would like push their bodies forward. And then you've always got really good support from their backline. The backline is, I don't think, was an issue whatsoever with this
No.
team. That I was kind of hoping that that would be what pushed them forwards, but they didn't really gel at all.
They would have been.
Like Sado and Fury were very underwhelming. They sat very passive and didn't fight too much for map control.
I think they would have been way better off playing Fury Hog and mirroring the Seoul's play style, the way they played with around the Ana instead of like the Zen.
They tried that though.
Did they?
Well, they tried that with like 24 hours max of practice.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
They didn't,
Like,
they
I
didn't
think
have much
early
practice
on,
it, but
if they because I mean it plays a lot more individualistic. Fury has probably one of the best Roadhogs in the Final Four. Like that's just having not watched him play in a very long time. Like
Yeah.
there may have been. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020. There may have been better ways that they could have facilitated their team.
And that's the
obviously,
thing.
looking at
It's
it now.
all hindsight analysis because it is so difficult to know exactly what you need to do when you're prepping for a tournament like this. Like when the meta is still up in the air, like,
Yeah.
okay, we know what patch we're going to be playing on, but the meta itself was actively evolving during scrim time. And you're during quarantine, you've got choices of which players to field and all of that kind of stuff. Like it's hard.
Well, it is about taking a very complex meta and simplifying it, and I think that's what Seoul did. Like Seoul weren't the most complex, strategically detailed team among the top 4, but they knew what they were doing, and they did a rather like simple job. They knew their win condition, and they executed it almost perfectly every time. Like the amount of times Gesture kind of like got hooked in, was in the back line, he get nano boosted, and then you have the Valkyrie backing it up, and like the healing output is just insane, and Gesture doesn't die, and it sets up the double snipers. Like they knew what they were doing all the time.
Yeah.
And it was very simple. Like when you look at that, you're not like, I mean, there's nothing like super scientific going on here. It's like
No.
they got the Roadhog in the back line, and they're using 2 support ultimates to keep him alive, and it's giving the rest of the team space. So I think that was really beautiful by Seoul. 2 interesting things about Philly here. First one I can't remember because it's been so long and I'm tired.
Okay.
Second one is, oh yeah, first one actually. I really hope that there's more like content around Fusion's trip to Korea and some like post-match analysis by like Christopher or someone, because I think that
Yeah.
Fusion was one of the most interesting teams out of these 4, because you
Yeah.
could see the cogs turning. You could see them like try to think, figure out how to fix the problem, make very like a lot of adaptations, quite frankly, and like it felt like they made decisions based on thinking, even though it didn't work out. And I'd love to know what they were thinking in the moment, how they adapted, like what the thought behind it was, because there was so much happening. And secondly, I think Fusion is going to be one of the most interesting teams to talk about in the offseason, because I think we have to be realistic here and say that they're on a bit of a timer to actually start winning something before teams like Paris Eternal just becomes incredibly dominant with Shock and a lot of up-and-coming other teams. And I think, you know, when we went into the season, we said Philadelphia Fusion, they are a super team. Like that, you know, they picked up Fury, they built around Carpe, and they are a super team, and they need to start winning. Just like this should be their time.
Absolutely.
I think the benefit
you know.
is that this is a team that clearly is like willing to invest in like players and just bringing in as much talent as possible.
You can't
it's just,
get much more talent than this.
Well, that's the thing. Like, can you get more talented, right? Like, you know, you could argue like, you know, they have one of the most talented rosters in like the league, like, or in the whole league. Just an individual player talent.
Yeah.
But clearly, there's got to be something else that kind of puts it all together.
Okay, well, let's shift away from this topic then and end it with sort of just end our discussion on Philly by saying I want to take 1 point away from each of you of what you want to see Philly do moving forward. Start with you, Josh.
Well, I think that this season, to me, has showcased that they have all the talent they need. and the players are really intelligent. But what I have felt has been lacking this season, even though everybody involved in Philadelphia speaks very highly of their coaching staff, it's that vision from, and I think it has to come from the coaching staff to make this a real team, right? Like they're a great collection of very talented individuals, but I don't want to see any changes to the coaching staff because I think the people involved are talented. Don't want to see any changes to the team particularly either. I don't think that either of those things will help that much. What I want to see is a shift in like the vision for the coaching staff to be much more about the details, about like the actual strategic detail of how you guys are working together, and try and promote the coordination between people and how they work on like adapting each individual player's style for different opponents, or to abuse their opponent's weaknesses, to take a more of like a thinker's mentality to the game instead of a fragger's mentality.
I was kind of gonna go in the same vein as Josh. I think the way that Philly could kind of pose it internally is like they got fourth based off of just individual talent. Like they didn't really play like a well-oiled machine really here. They've done it in the season, but it was really just kind of like the aggressive dive style. They need to actually kind of come together and play as a unit. And I think like you look at how the Shock kind of work with bringing people in and out, and like how everything seems so structured and together with the Shock, and like the Shock are not a more talented team like top to bottom than the Fusion. Like they're about the same. It's just the Shock seem to get so much more value out of their players and get the best, and they have them playing together. Where if Philly can find that piece, the sky's the limit for them. So I don't think they need to make massive sweeping changes. I think you'd be kind of crazy to at this point. Like I think you've built this roster, you kind of have to see it out until it just explodes. Maybe you look to bring in another flex support. So if you want to play double flex support, so maybe you look to make like kind of minor additions like on the bench in moves like that. But otherwise, this team may just need more time together. May just need more time.
How about you, Johnny?
I would like to see. I mean, I agree with Josh that I think it might be a bit of a, I don't want to say culture. You know, they are very small things to figure out internally, I think, in like how they envision their team and like how people work within the team. I don't want to make overarching claims because I don't know exactly like how it works within a team, and I find it very like rude to assume that. But like one thing I liked about New York, and like they weren't even in the top 4, but they brought in players like Animo, who at the time was pretty inexperienced, but he like sat on the bench and he learned from Arc for a little bit, and then he got his playtime. This year they brought in Mandu, who hasn't seen a lot of playtime, but it's still like a young player on the bench that is still like part of the culture and like learns and stuff like that. I would like to see Fusion maybe pick up like 1 or 2 young players, like maybe pick up a young tank or a young support player, like Matt said, like someone who can flex around a little bit. And immediately you get more of that with that note that Alarm sent Poke or whatever, where it's like teamwork, you know? It's more like teamwork, trying to be better and learn from each other, and that kind of vibe. I actually, this might be a hot take, I actually kind of preferred the Philly that played Hisu and Ivy later in the season than the one with Carp in it early in the season. Because it felt like a more complete Philly in terms of like you weren't just relying on Carpe, and Carpe wasn't the main man, and it felt like a more complete team in a sense that everyone like they were equals, if that makes sense. And I think that's great with the Shock as well. Like when we reference the Shock, like they are, you know, equals because everyone is so freaking good on that team, and I really like that mentality and like how I saw that Fusion team. So I would try to find a way to move away from this like Carpe is a hit scan god kind of mentality, and have everyone within the team internally like root for each other and work together. I'm not saying they aren't doing that now, but that's sort of like, if I had a vision, that would be the vision I would strive for.
I agree with all of your points. The point I was going to make is kind of an amalgamation of almost all of your points, so it's going to sound like I'm just reiterating exactly everything you've just said. But I do want to see them make changes. I want to see them get rid of Chipser, because that's just a That was this meme PR pick. And I want to see them add more depth to the bench in the DPS department. And a big reason for that being what you've already said, Johnny, which is like, I think that they often, it's always been the talking point with Philly, I think, over the course of this year, is their DPS line, right? And we've always, I brought that up in contention with compared to other teams. And this comes into play as well with this idea of what you want for your team, which is what, Josh, you were talking about, this idea, this vision, where Shock has the vision of next man up. It's literally like everyone on the team, if you're on the bench, it doesn't matter, you're all playing to win. Like, you're playing your role that is set out for you. And I feel like with Philly, maybe this isn't even intentional, but there's definitely some subconscious bias when it comes to probably wanting to get the maximum value you can out of Carpe, because whether they like it or not, I mean, I'm sure they love it, but he is the face of that team, and he has been for a very long time as a star player, and at times that can probably hold you back a little bit. Like, you gotta sometimes maybe put some of those players on the bench. But yeah, that's the one thing I think that Philly could do to upgrade. They're not perfect in my eyes. They're close to it, but some more DPS depth, and what you were saying, Johnny, as well, with them picking up a rookie. I think that could be pretty good for them, actually. Just try and pick up a rookie and mold them into the player you want them to be, kind of like what Shock did with Ans.
Yeah, and there's some good contenders talent coming up, so might as well take a shot.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk then about the semifinals, which was the San Francisco Shock versus the Shanghai Dragons. And this is probably the first time that we're gonna, that we talked about Shanghai really, in this episode. But thinking back, like the expectations that everybody had for Shanghai, I think they're going to be quite disappointed with how they finished in this final four.
Definitely.
The expectations were almost like,
I mean, they were the favorites.
Like, yeah,
they were the favorites to win.
They were the favorites, but it was like everyone, like maybe not everybody, but like a large chunk was expecting them to be like a dominant favorite. And I think the Shock showed signs during the year of like, being more vulnerable, but what they did is really interesting, the Shock. And what I think, I mean, we used to see it in Call of Duty in the past, like, for better or worse, Control is 2 of the game modes in a series. If you can just get really fucking good at Control and win one other map somewhere, who the fuck cares where it is, you're good. A lot of Call of Duty teams won a lot of money being really good at search and destroy because it was game 2 and it was game 5. And if you were good at game 2 and game 5, you were always going to be there at the end. You just needed to find one map somewhere else. That's kind of how the Shock did. They end up winning the entire thing. They mastered Control. They were dominant on Control. And then they were just like trying to find a map somewhere else. It just happened to be hybrid consistently.
Was this a case of with the Shanghai versus the Shock as well? Like, I will say with Control, is it still, in my opinion, the one game mode that tests all of your fundamentals of the game. And the cleaner you are, the more disciplined you are as a team, the better results you're probably going to be having on it. But I remember this match, watching this first map, and fuck me, the Shock clutched on Control. I think this series early on should have been a Shanghai Dragons win, 1-0.
Ants and Striker are just so good, man. And like
this
game mode. Yeah, this game mode genuinely did, I think, because of course you have to be amazing, like, and super coordinated to even be at this level to start with. And so obviously both of these teams are really good in that aspect. But the difference between the two teams was Ants and Striker. And I feel like that's the case whenever they play on Control as well. It's just Striker can play Tracer on Control. And that's like, it's the only map type where he's consistently able to play Tracer, and he's the best Tracer in the world. And so you pair that alongside Ants getting picks, and it's phenomenal what the guy can do.
Him versus Fleta in the Tracer battle wasn't even a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it all season long. When people were saying that Fleta was the #1 Tracer in the world, wait for him to. A lot of people. And not just people that were involved in APAC, but also Fleta was very high in a lot of Tracer stats. Because he was dominating in APAC on the Tracer.
Good Tracer players to oppose him.
Well, that's only part of it though, because Fleta was incredibly good at syncing up with Fearless and Stand 1, and so he works off the space that his team gives him, and he delivers because his aim is really good as well. But if you put him in more like scrappy situations where he has to go and make his own space and make his own plays and win the tracer duels and that kind of stuff, I mean, the difference between him and Striker in those instances is massive.
Like take like a 1v1 to the side, or yeah.
I'm not. Also, I would like to add to that I think one of the coolest things Shock did all tournament was when Violet would swap to Baptiste.
Hell
because
yeah.
he wouldn't do it that often. You know, maybe do it like, you know, a couple minutes a map, not even every map. But when Violet swapped to Baptiste, it completely threw the enemy team for a loop and most likely ruined their entire strategy.
It's like putting Soldier 76 out there.
Well, I mean, but better.
Yeah.
but we saw that on Oasis against Shanghai. I think Violet brought it out for like a little bit to end the round. And I completely believe that it actually made a difference in winning some of these control rounds. Seoul couldn't play Pharah, and we'll get to that. But like Seoul couldn't play Pharah because Violet would just swap to Baptiste and own them. Like that, I love that pick so much from Violet, and no other flex support pretty much did it the entire tournament. But
it's
Baptiste, it was so impressive.
It's a true Violet only kind of thing to do as well, because he plays the Baptiste. Everyone else in the league plays the Baptiste as support, and Violet doesn't. He plays the Baptiste as a clutch hero. You know, like
he almost like plays it like it. Yeah, it's super weird.
Yeah. It really is very strange. Like he will hold on his own on high grounds, and he will duel people. He will use the immortality field for himself. He will duel people. He'll add he'll use self-heal, and then he'll also heal his team, obviously, but that's not his priority. Whereas it is everybody else's priority is to play him as a healer. And Violet's just that skilled that he plays the hero totally differently. And it locks you away from being able to play certain styles.
He finishes maps consistently, like almost near like the top damage for that team when he plays Baptiste.
It's crazy.
Like, it's actually just like so stupid, like to think about. Like he could just pull that out.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's like even like how Johnny mentioned, like against the Pharah type of compositions, like you have to play what into 3 hit scans pretty much, right? Like, you know, you're playing into like the Widow, like, you know, Asher Hanzo, and then also Baptiste makes it impossible to play.
I also, though, in the I had a tweet at the beginning of this match, Shock versus Shanghai, where at the end of the control, people were like, oh, they're just going to dominate. They're incredible. So I tweeted that once the hog mirror starts, that's when the match like really begins, because the game is so different from there. Because it was obvious from watching the Shock that they were going to win the control games, but they had been losing the majority of the hog mirrors. And that continued for the rest of the entirety of the tournament, was that they were losing assault and escort. They were only winning on hybrid maps when the hog mirrors were actually coming in. And when you look at this match overall, Hollywood was really close. If Hollywood goes the other way, this is a 3-1 win for Shanghai, and they book their ticket into the finals. It was really close.
Did Super play all of the hybrids? Because he plays on Kings Row and he plays on Hollywood.
Yeah. Yes, I think he did.
I remember that shit.
But then the other thing as well is that Smurf was playing all of the assault maps. So I don't think it was like a what do you call it? Like hog diff. Main tank diff.
Main tank diff.
It's just the way that they understand the map is different. Like the thing is, the Shock are just so good at playing on Kings Row and Hollywood specifically. And then the rest of the time, when they're playing the double sniper mirror, they aren't quite as good at the map control game and like getting their players in the best positions possible. But here, I mean, this was very close. Very close. I think that Shanghai will almost be wishing here that they picked Kings Row, because they had a genuine chance to be able to win this series right here. They fucking dominated the next 2 maps. Like, I feel like people will just look over this because Shock ended up winning the series. But like, if the final map is escort, or if they manage to turn Hollywood, which was close, Shanghai look like they dominate this series. Like, it doesn't even look close.
I wonder why they didn't go Kings Row. Like, is that maybe them just showing too much respect for San Francisco, because
it's one of their favorite maps to play?
Yeah, but Shanghai was sick in the season on the Kings Row. Like Void, like on that high ground, like absolutely just dunked on everybody.
It's probably just like a scrim stats kind of thing, where it's like, I don't know, our best map is Hollywood because we win 65% of the time or some shit.
You do look at Shanghai though, and you struggle to come up with answers to how to improve this roster moving forward.
I mean, what was so insane is, I mean, playing Flera and DM. Sorry, Brad, for interrupting you.
Yeah,
playing
no,
Flera and DM, and then you're swapping Lip and DM, and just demolishing, like George said. I mean, that's ludicrous. That's insane.
I would almost say that if they had been playing Lip and DM on Hollywood, this series could have been a 3-1 win for Shanghai. Like, I think that Fleta was not really like. I don't think Fleta was playing the Hanzo to the same level that Lip was. Lip was really doing an incredible job at shutting down Striker when the later this series got on.
Would you say it's almost like a Carpe-like scenario?
No, because the playstyles are so significantly different.
No, I'm saying where they felt the kind of need to play Fleta.
Well, I mean, they didn't. That was what I liked about the adaptation. They actually subbed him out. Like, you're subbing out your league MVP player Fleta. Here, but I think that maybe it was a little too late.
Yeah,
and I think that's a factor of just these teams didn't scrim against each other extensively before they came in, so they didn't quite know how much they'd be tested, and they didn't know who. You didn't really know like which players would crumble.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Johnny, you just don't know where. Like, I think for all of these top 4 teams, like, I mean, maybe Seoul, you can kind of be like, okay, like we can find a spot or two. You can maybe go out and like free agency, try and find something. But Shanghai, like, how do you improve this roster? Like, I don't think there's an improving this roster. I think it's just running it back.
And the roster's so good. I think when it gets to these final 4 scenarios as well, what I said about the mentality, we don't know the mentality of the teams coming into the final 4 when they're in that playoff scenario, but I guarantee you that a lot just weighs down onto that. Like how well the scrims were on that day, on a given day, how confident you are coming into the next match, into your first set of matches. There's only so much that, the prep can do. And yeah, if you look at pound for pound, a lot of these rosters, like where the hell are you finding upgrades? I mean,
well, we also say, how do you improve these rosters? And the way you almost improve these rosters is by just trying to fucking hold on to everybody. Because you can imagine there's going to be a ton of teams who want some of these players who are on benches of, Shanghai, of San Francisco, of Philly.
Like DM, for example. I mean, DM didn't play for the majority of the regular season, lost the times when he was played, even though he's obviously not the issue because the guy's popping the fuck off.
Ding is sitting on their bench, right? Like
exactly. There's there are players
pretty good.
There are players that might want to get more play time.
Hey, Striker sat on the bench pretty much all of last year. And he was like not crying on stream about it, but he had like the stream titles, about like being benched and like all that, and we were like, "How is Striker being benched?"
I think last year's a different. Last year's way different though. Just because Goats was primarily the whole year, like he was not gonna play. Like now with 2-2-2, I think it makes it way harder to justify being on a bench somewhere for an extended period of time.
Well, yes and no. I mean, okay, I mean, it depends on how cynic you want to be here. So I apologize in advance. But I mean, we know that most of these teams, like in the top anyway, like these top 4 teams, maybe there's like 5, maybe add another one. They're just like, they're not equally good, but they're roughly the same level. And at that point, you're kind of just playing like meta randomizer on like who gets the best meta going into these playoffs to give you a slight advantage. And then who can adapt better. But like, Seoul wouldn't have been this good if it was a different meta. And it's like, Shanghai had DM, but like without DM, they wouldn't have been this good in this meta.
It's
like, you need some luck to go with a great roster.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking the team that you could make out of the players who are on the bench of these teams. You could make like almost like a top 6 team out of the players on the bench of these top 4 teams.
Really
it's actually just wild.
Let's talk about the lower bracket semifinals as well. I'm trying to speed through these a little bit now as well.
When did this match? This match was good. I thought this
was the big upset. Like if I was to call like the biggest upset, I don't necessarily think it would be Philadelphia getting knocked out. I think it would be this one right here.
Absurd, honestly. Like Shanghai, we expected them to be in the finals. Like that was just a given. When you ask most people, if they said otherwise, they had been fucking, I don't know, at the peace pipe or something beforehand. But like,
Yeah, I considered this a pretty large upset, mostly because the reason that I thought Seoul Dynasty would be the fourth place team coming into these finals is because when they played domestically against Shanghai and Shanghai mirrored them in the Hog, Shanghai pretty easily beat them in the Hog mirror, right? So it was like, okay, maybe the Hog is better and that's why Seoul were winning, but Shanghai mirrored them with no practice and just rolled them.
Mhm.
So that to me indicated that Seoul were not that good of a team, but they had hit on the right meta, and they were probably going to struggle to beat these teams once it actually did come down to a mirror. And instead, Seoul looked fantastic on some of these maps. Like when the thing about this game was it was so much about the map selections, because the Kings Row and Dorado pick for Seoul. Holy shit,
Oh,
what
my lord.
incredible map picks in
Yeah.
in
Dorado,
here.
dude.
Like the counter strats on Kings Row, and then the wonderful idea that they had of like how to play Dorado. Like just enormous kudos to the Seoul
Wizard Young,
Dynasty.
dude. He
But
was a
we
year ahead of his
also-
time.
We had the narrative as well of the profit gesture playoff narrative of when they turn up or they play a lot better in
Oh,
the
dude.
playoffs. But that was always just it was on the back burner until this match when we saw the individual performances of Profit and Gesture, and they were just coming alive. We were like, "Oh my god, it's been a meme every year, and now it's finally fucking happening."
This is
It
the
felt like
fucking
going
Seoul
from
Dynasty.
like an action movie into like sci-fi.
Yeah.
You're just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? And,
Well-
okay, we're living in a mythological world. Like,
Yeah,
what's
what was
happening?
happening?
This is what you thought this team would look like most of the year.
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
like, hey, you take these players from London, you give them a little bit of a reboot with like a bunch of new,
Well-
like really good players, and
Yeah.
like maybe it breathes some more life into them. For
Matt,
half the season, it just looked like they were shopping for Gucci, hanging out.
remember.
You know, they didn't even look like they were playing half
Well, the start of the
season.
season
Then
as well,
it's like,
people
"Ah,
had-
fuck it."
People had their doubts with this team as well because they were like, "Oh, I don't know," given like the London core.
I mean,
Like-
those were reasonable doubts, judging by
Yes.
how the
They were.
regular season
Yeah.
went.
But I remember at the start of this year in some bar in Korea, speaking to Arnold and just being drunk as fuck and just saying to him, "Nah, I like your team. I really like your team." Just like grasping him by the shoulder, just reassuring him that his team was good. You know, I was like, I could see some high hopes. Little did I know that I was actually having epiphany into the outcome of the 2020
I
finals.
picked them as my dark horse in the preseason article, but
I mean, that's
I
not what a
didn't-
dark horse is, but we can
uh,
get into it another time.
I mean, yeah,
I picked them
'cause
as my APAC winner.
Nobody predicted
There you
them to like win the league, but
Some people
I
did in the prediction video. I can't remember who it was. Some people predicted Seoul to
Video?
win.
you
Video.
gotta feel way better about this team's future after this weekend. I do worry
Do
about
you?
Well,
No,
Do you,
the thing is,
though?
I think we're getting the exact same shit next year.
Oh yeah, we may get the same thing. And honestly, they may just go on another little vacation like they did after the London thing. You know, they
the fucking
But they also did get fortunate with the meta. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to say that. Like, Gesture and Marvel being able to play this style.
Yeah.
Okay, if Gesture is also really good at the Orisa and the Winston comps, but there's just better teams at being able to play dive, and there's
You
better
remember,
teams at being able to
we
play
didn't
rush
think-
by a long shot.
we didn't think they were going to get by Guangzhou or New York.
No.
You guys
Like-
did.
Like well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but who
But this-
could have? Like, if
Jonathan
they didn't
did.
play the Roadhog and it
This
was a different type of
happened.
meta, they might
This-
not have.
I kid you not, this happened almost every single tournament that we saw this year that Seoul played in. Almost every single one. You remember in the
Yeah.
lead up to it, the regular season games, they would just look dog shit. We were like, "What's going on with Seoul? We don't know. We just
Yeah.
don't know. This team's lost.
They just
blow
seem
it
so
up, blow it up,
uninterested with regular season.
blow it
They
up,
started
find
the
something
year
else."
like 1-4, and then they were 3 up against the Shanghai Dragons in the Melee finals.
Can I just say
They
the
were up 3-0 and got
parallels?
reverse swept.
The parallels of Seoul and London in 2018 are so apt. Like, I was
Yeah,
looking at
really
the
are.
regular season of London, and it's like stage 1 and 2 did really well in 2018. Stage 3 and 4, less so. I think they went like 4 and 6 and 4 and 6 or something close to that. Like, they didn't do particularly well in their stages, and then they came alive in the playoffs. I was like, oh my god. This kind of narrative, it's like, you look at the Seoul Dynasty's regular season and how they performed, it's so It's like we're just seeing history repeat itself.
You have players that are like this though, that like they can turn it on when it matters, but like during the regular season, they're just not it. But eventually, though, it's gonna turn out like how it did last year with London, where you can't turn it on. You're so far behind, you don't get the meta, and
That was goats.
that's it.
Yeah,
that might also happen with like if this was a Reinhardt Rush comp at the end of the year, 100% would have happened again. Like Saul would have just bombed out.
Even like their diva play with Marvel wasn't great throughout the
exactly.
whole
Yeah, if this had been like Winston Diva, they would
Yeah.
have bombed out as well.
I mean,
probably.
that's the one thing you need to fucking fix with this team. I was mauling at the start of the year at the fact that they were playing Marvel off tank for the majority of the time. It's like, okay, I can buy into the idea that maybe Mitchell isn't the future of the off tank for this team. But for real, like I don't think you can rely on gesture solely. We've seen teams, San Francisco, Shanghai Dragons. They have two main tanks that like play different roles. If you cannot have one main tank that does it all like gesture, get another main tank, Marvel, and then get a proper fucking off tank.
This team really has gotten away with murder this year.
They really have. It's an easy solution. They should just go get Fury.
Easy.
Just bring everybody back with a new logo.
Here is also potentially where Shanghai Dragons lost the series. If they make a draw happen here, I think they almost certainly win. But because they ended up losing, because they didn't keep track of gesture, and he goes on this big long flank, and he kills Stan One and then Izayaki afterwards, just kind of rolling around in their back line.
Like it's ridiculous.
I think this ended up with the win, right? Because he bought them so much space all across the point that Prophet was able to get kills. I think this ends up coming out with a win. Actually,
I
maybe
can't remember. Dude, this was like at 7 a.m. I can't remember.
Seoul really did get away with murder the whole year, playing gesture and Marvel pretty much the whole time. Remember this team signed Slime and then barely played him. Like I mean, like Slime is on this roster. Like
how much time did Creative get prior to the playoffs? Just plugging in, playing Ana here in the playoffs.
I do wonder if they would have gotten.
He was good though.
Yeah, if they would have gotten Twilight, I wonder how that would have panned out for this team. But
probably the exact same, to be honest. I feel like this.
I mean, the rest of the team just seems like it's a. Like Michelle looked good last year that he didn't play. Like
it's the tanks, really, isn't it? It all comes down to the tanks and getting them on comfortable positions.
By the way, this team has Wizard Young as a coach.
Yeah,
it's like we forget that sometimes after last year, but you know,
Man's been keeping his head down for the last 18 months. Doesn't want to make any more YouTube videos and provides
interviews of him saying,
"God, what was genius and whatnot."
Genius was the quote.
Typical genius. Yeah.
This game though, I mean, you go forwards to Dorado, and I feel like this is where Seoul won the mental game.
Yeah, I think they boomed Shanghai.
The fifth map, Busan, Shanghai were boomed, completely and utterly boomed. They were population boomsville, and it all comes down to Dorado for me because Seoul just picked a map that we hadn't really seen very much in the playoffs, and they had a perfect strategy for how to be able to run it. It was just a pocket pick, and they won. And Shanghai realized that they might lose.
I think this is a good learning experience, though, for the Dragons. Like, I feel like everything. I don't want to say it was like easy for them throughout the year, but it probably felt pretty easy to these players for a bit, considering how good they were. I think a loss here definitely kind of puts them in a. Obviously, they would have loved to win, but I think a loss definitely puts them in a good spot for next year to stay motivated and not kind of let up in these type of situations. Like,
yeah, they got to be raring to go for next year.
Oh, this is the team that would love for next year to start today. Like, they want to probably get right back into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two alternatives. They're either going to be burnt the fuck out, or they're just going to be raring to go. I mean, I don't really see a middle ground in that. Yeah. I mean, an interesting combination to get to our eventual grand finals that we're now going to talk about, which was San Francisco Shock versus Seoul, which was I mean, I'd love to see who got the most points in terms of their bracket predictions. Because remember,
Did you see Custer was in like 6th place or something?
Yeah, it was 8th place, I think. Yeah.
Custer?
Yeah. I don't know why.
Can we see his bracket, actually? I'm going to find his bracket and try and pull it up.
I tried to find it on the Overwatch League website the other day, but I don't know how to reach that old bracket thingy.
I thought you were about to
Yeah,
say you don't know how to
wow.
read. I was about to say, I was like, that's
I don't know
a
how to read, dude.
problem.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just madness as well with the whole Washington Justice journey. I know he had Shock to win it all, and
Oh,
I
I
wonder if
found
he
it.
got bonus points for Shock winning.
You had to. You choose the scoreline as well, though. The grand finals.
Okay,
I found the
so-
bracket. If we want to do a live analysis of Custer's
Imagine if
Papega
Custer
bracket,
won the 10k
That would have
for
been
getting the
100K,
best
you mean?
bracket. Would he be able to
yeah, that would have
claim
been
the money?
hilarious.
So he
This
pretty
is
much only
Custer's.
predicted the upper bracket correctly in both North America and Grand Finals.
Because he had Valiant going far in North America.
And in APAC as well, he got the initial picks right, and then was right about Dragons.
It's crazy that this was one of the best, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like actively so many things
What
are
was the
wrong
best?
with it.
If you go to leaderboards at the top, what was the best bracket?
I think this was like 6th or 5th.
Penelope or something won. Yeah,
What did
Penelope
Penelope
Custer,
get?
Custer in ninth.
Had to be a Seoul Dynasty fan.
What was going on here?
Washington beating Dallas, losing to Shock.
Oh my god!
Wow,
Look at this.
Florida beating Gladiators.
That's insane.
This is
Imagine.
good
Hold on.
stuff.
What does the grand
what they have
finals?
for Grand Finals?
Yeah. What does the grand
Probably where
finals
they
one
won
look
it.
like?
Seoul, there it is.
Seoul.
Yeah.
Seoul.
Well, I mean, that's probably. They also got a lot of points from Asia just predicting that Seoul would make it through, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
but
my god.
Wow.
Asia
There
bracket.
it is.
Holy
What
shit.
the-
Penelope popped
Penelope,
off. Penelope popped off.
Yo. Okay.
Coming
Okay.
for our
bring
job.
them in next year. Bring
Imagine.
them in.
Hold on. If you go to grand finals,
Analyst.
imagine the pressure they were feeling watching the Shock Shanghai match when it went to Mat 5.
Yeah.
Probably forgot about the bracket, to be honest. Come on, let's be
No,
real.
no. If you're this far ahead, I'm following this all the way because it's 10 grand.
Hell yeah.
There's no fucking
no,
chance.
it's 100,000.
100,000
No.
for a perfect bracket.
Perfect.
Oh,
bracket.
okay.
no
I
one's
see.
no one's gonna get that. This one was damn good though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Got boomed by Washington in North America, and then unfortunately by Philadelphia not winning against Seoul. Because otherwise, if Philly won against Seoul, I mean, the rest of that bracket probably would have been perfect as well. Interesting,
Penalty.
very interesting.
Good job.
Good work. You should have got her on as one of your guests on Watchpoint.
Instead,
The
they kept
bracket
me
winner.
up at 8 a.m. or whatever
Yeah.
the hell time I was on.
Kurt,
Somebody
next year
said-
we're hitting up Penelope. Maybe we'll get you some
I
money.
just remember when I was on Watchpoint, somebody said something, and it was just so like such a painfully obvious take. I think it was either it may have been you, Johnny. And then I went.
Yeah, it may have been me because I was on the show, Matt.
Yeah, and then I went at Johnny. I went at whoever said it for a bit. Somebody said something so painfully obvious, and I was like,
Must have
"Oh
been
yeah,
not
that's a
that
good
painful
point.
if you
They
can't
played the
remember it."
match as well. You know, they played 5 maps. Like, I was just going in on them. I forgot.
Why
It's so
are you-
ironic that you
Oh.
were the one to point that out as well.
Yeah, you're digging at people for obvious takes when at the time it would have been 9 in the morning,
Yeah.
and they would have been up for 9 hours.
Look, I was just jacked up on a ton of caffeine. I had drank a 30 a Trenta iced coffee. I had some G Fuel.
Yeah.
I ate a pizza at 4 a.m. I was just gearing to go.
What an insane finals we had, though. Best finals that we've had thus far in the Overwatch League.
Thank you for
Definitely.
having me on.
Considering
man.
the
Thank you.
other 2 finals combined are probably as long as this series. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Damn, I really wish. Actually, no, I'm not gonna say that I wish we went to map 7. Okay, so my prediction was Seoul were gonna win 4-3, and so everything went as planned until Hollywood, and I thought that Seoul would win Hollywood and then win the final escort. But Shock being able, I just skipped right to the end. No one gives a shit about map 1 to 5. I just skipped right to the end. But I mean,
This would
yeah,
have been
whatever.
one of the series-
Start at the first. I'm
this would
fucking
have been one of
booed.
the
Whatever.
series that Shock actually would have gotten hurt by their kind of win the control and kind of everything else because the later half of the series you didn't have that control. It goes like to
Yeah. I think they would have lost if they went to 7. I agree with Jonathan. That's what I put out in my tweet at the beginning.
Yeah.
I said they're going to win the control and hybrid maps, so they're
Yeah.
going to win 4-2. But if they had happened to lose one of them, if the Seoul Dynasty squeak any map away from them, then they'd probably lose in 7.
God, what a wild scenario if Seoul would have won the league.
Yeah, but also
Dude, Costa was mauling about that all weekend.
I think this is like going to become a big fan narrative as well, where they're like, oh, Shock only won on controller hybrid. Is it deserved? At the end of the day, when you look across the entirety of this series,
Somebody would
Shock
say that. Is it deserved?
there were a lot of people saying that on the
Bro, what are these
on the
people
subreddit.
smoking, bro?
I mean, that's a very fair
come
take,
on.
I think, Matt. I think that's super fair.
Oh, you go to Reddit with those idiots. Nah, hell no.
No, but
you won the series.
That's what I said in the
What do you mean?
win?
I mean, the series.
Win?
The series is an arbitrary collection of game modes. I mean, in theory, there could be 3 times that assault comes up in the first 7, and that could be the rule set. And then you'd be like, "Oh, you won the series." I mean,
that's what I said on the post show.
Operating in
That I
a
was
fairyland where 3 assaults are in a series, and they won the series.
No,
It
that's
doesn't
not
matter
fairyland,
how
that's
many
hell.
series.
This is dumb.
my point
Okay, so
anyway,
we
though,
should
Matt,
just
is
go
that they
then.
played the better Overwatch. Shock played the better Overwatch no matter what. So, like,
Okay.
whatever game modes, you could put game modes together where they
Oh,
would
I
have
thought you were
lost.
siding with those other people.
No, I'm not siding with the fans
Oh, I
because
thought
I
you were
think you
siding
look
with
at the
those people. That's why I
you
was
look at the
getting
actual
angry.
game, look
I
at
was
the
like, when
eye
did you
test. Like,
become dumb? Yeah.
Shock were clearly the better team, but at the same time, you could have made the Seoul Dynasty win with a format change here. I really believe that.
So-
if you just swap the second control for an escort map, Seoul win the entire tournament, the whole of the league.
But that's what I said in the post show, that I was so happy that Shock won this way, in that they won Hollywood. Because if you look at Hollywood, both teams played double sniper. And so essentially Shock beat Seoul at their own game. Had they not done that, and had like 7th map and like a control or whatever, then I think you could have made that argument like, oh, they were carried by strikers, trace from control, you know, they got so many free wins in that regard. But because they won on Hollywood with the double sniper composition, they were superior than Seoul at their own composition. And I think that was crucial for that narrative that you were speaking of right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure.
I thought
mean-
Josh was siding with the people who said it doesn't.
I don't think it's a dumb take though, to be honest, because like the thing is, the way that BO7s work is so different to the way the BO5s work as well, and it all comes down to the order.
And would you rather see like a double BO5 instead of a BO7?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't thought through the
That's the
argument
way
like
to fix it, right?
far
I mean,
enough.
we'd get pushed in Overwatch.
But a
right?
double
So, like, they would
BO5
change it some way.
Yeah, a double BO5 means that you play 4 maps of control over the course of both of the BO5s, which puts like a crazy thing on
Crazy emphasis on control.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I mean, I guess like so I never kind of thought about that way, because the way Call of Duty was you had 2 search and destroys and 2 hard points. So you had 2 game modes that made up 4 maps in a set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what some people on Reddit were suggesting is that not in these big BO7 series, not only do you get to choose the map, but you get to choose the game mode. So you wouldn't just say. So I mean, that is just like a more normal style of doing things. Basically, it's just all maps are available. Pick a map.
Mm-hmm.
I
don't hate
that's
that. I
never
think that's
gonna happen.
I don't think that will
bad.
happen. I don't think that Overwatch, the company wants that to happen, but I think that would be a good system.
Now,
like, what's wrong with that?
What I would be okay with is if you got rid of assault and you still did like control hybrid escort, but then instead of that assault map, you could pick out of the other game modes to play.
What do
Like
you
not
mean?
the whole series. But like,
you
let's
mean
say like let's say
all
game
4 have
4
been
was
played.
supposed to be assault, you would remove it and they could pick between whether they wanted an extra escort or hybrid.
Yeah, now that I think about it as well, if you could pick any map, it seems very likely to me that Shock would just keep picking control.
They would
maps.
just pick control. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. So like it actively might get worse.
They lose, pick control. Like it'd be. Imagine how boring that would be. Somebody would pick. You would have escort control, escort control, escort control. It'd be brutal.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it
Can we
depends
just
on-
enjoy and savor this moment as well? Because not so long ago we had predetermined maps for every series. So, you know, let's just savor this moment for a bit, you know.
Yeah.
It
Map
also
pick is good.
depends on. I reckon it could be quite interesting over time. Like we'd see teams specialize in certain maps, or certain game modes, I suppose, to throw other teams off.
Well,
Like, you'd
you're
still have to-
always going to have this issue with a game that has multiple game modes like this.
Yes.
If
yeah.
like push is a thing for Overwatch 2, right? Like that
does help,
You're
though.
no, it doesn't help. It just dilutes it even more, right?
No, I think that does help because
Well,
Because
if
then you have 5 game modes. So for a BO5, you have
that's
one of
providing-
each game mode.
That's providing that like assault is still something that they want to go with in the future, right?
I mean, I'm
we've already
making the
seen-
assumption that they're not just gonna botch.
We've already
an
seen
entire
assault
game mode.
changes.
I mean, people don't like assault, so I could see
Yeah, people
them
don't like
removing it from
assault. I could totally
from the
see
game.
them replacing
I'd be
it with
fine.
push.
I would like-
But
I would like them to keep it, to be honest, because I think having 5 game modes it's just a healthy thing. Because like even in
Nice.
this BO7, you get all the way through 5 before you ever have to repeat anything.
Yeah.
I would like that.
yeah, that's way healthier. Yeah, I agree with that.
Anyway, my kind of point for bringing this up was, even though the argument itself has some merit, that, you know, Shock did literally win by only winning control and hybrid, they were the best team in the grand finals.
Yeah.
You can tell that when you watch in the very last grand final that happened right here between Shock and Seoul. All of the maps that Seoul won felt like they were just so having to try
They had to
so
work
hard to
so
win anything. They really did. They had to work for every little inch of the map. Whereas when Shock won, it felt fairly comfortable.
Okay, so
The
I want. Sorry, did you have anything, Bren?
no, I mean I'm just gonna kind of open it up with a good question, a nice little topic. But if you want to add on, go ahead.
Well, no, I can do that later. You can,
Okay, I was just gonna say, Super said in a post-game interview that this puts the San Francisco Shock essentially as the best Overwatch team of all time.
Yeah.
Not just in Overwatch League, but in every single iteration of tournament structures that we've had. The San Francisco Shock winning back-to-back championships as the competitions got higher and higher over the course of this entire season and the previous season puts them as the best team of all time. What do you guys make of that?
in Overwatch. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
My question is,
Who
who
is
did they
there?
overtake?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
who was it?
considered that?
It was
I
probably
would say-
like
What the Shock were
Was it
there already.
GC
Runaway?
Busan with the London
GC
Spitfire Corps.
Busan, maybe?
But GC Busan wasn't really like, the thing is, you can't say it was GC Busan and then London, because those are two very different teams, right?
Yeah.
Like they didn't field the same. I don't think they even fielded 4 of the same for the majority of them.
I'm
suppose-
not
I
about to
suppose-
have a discussion about who the second best team of Overwatch team of all time is.
I suppose Runaway.
But that's really important for whether or not Shock are, because
it would
Well,
be.
if
It
we're
would
gonna
have
have the
been.
conversation at all, then then Shock
who
are
do you-
number 1.
Well, I mean, who? Yeah, but like, who did they even pass? I mean,
I would say it
don't-
has to be NYXL.
I was going to say New York potentially,
Because
yeah.
even though they haven't really won anything, they were consistent over 3. I mean,
One
they
season.
didn't do that well, but 2 seasons. They finished 3rd last year. That's really fucking
That's
good.
fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
So I think maybe it was New York, but like I don't think there really has been like a greatest
Nobody
team. Like,
had a
maybe you could
strong-
say Runaway was the greatest organization.
Yeah,
you could say.
maybe Runaway.
Being able to conclusively say that you're the best Overwatch team of all time, I think that's a big deal. So
I think
don't
that
blame
is
them
it,
for
though,
that.
right? It just puts every other team to rest. Like, there's no real counter argument.
There may
sure,
not have been a counter argument before.
Sure, but you could make arguments. Like you could
Yeah, I
you could
guess you
bring up
could.
other teams, but now I mean
Yeah.
you're back-to-back champions. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of insane. Yeah, what an
Yeah.
insane
So-
finals.
What
Yeah.
do you think?
Memorable moments I wanted to talk about first.
Yeah, go
Unless you're done with the topic, Josh.
I was just gonna continue it in dumb ways. Let's just move on.
No, that's not.
I was going to
that's
talk
not.
about Philly, man, because they made the finals in 2018 and they made the top 4 this year, but it's just nonsense.
Let's no.
Just
Let's
move
no.
on.
Let's
Yeah,
no.
no.
Yeah.
I wanted to say talk about memorable moments. Like when we look back on this finals, like what are you going to remember? So we 2018, we remember Prophet having that moment on Volskaya and Mitch just like casting out of his mind.
Yeah.
This one, there are 2 moments for me. One and not so hype is Fitz using EMP on Busan,
The fat finger.
The
the fat finger. Because I
Yeah.
honestly believe Seoul would have won that round
Mm.
with that EMP.
Yep.
Had he not
I definitely think
and
so.
that could have been an immense swing of momentum in the series if Seoul manages to somehow win that round and then win Busan. I almost think they have the series in the bag at that point.
That's quite a big leap, though, isn't it? Because I saw people in my chat were saying that as well. If they hadn't, that fat finger was enormous. It did influence that round. They would have won the round. But it is a leap to then say they probably would have won
I mean,
Busan.
No,
This
I'm
is
not
like
saying probably, but it's a sliding door reality, right? It's a what if.
Sure,
and a really
yeah,
good
it would
what if.
increase their chances, of course.
Yeah.
But I think they still have a less than 50% chance of winning that third round that they go to.
Am I?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Am I dumb for not having any memorable moments from the grand finals? Like the overall finals was good, but it wasn't a moment that sticks out in my mind.
It was a finals that was like a little bit different. Like I think from casting the three of them, the first year
What
you
a
definitely
fucking subtle
remember.
flex.
You definitely remember the London play, the Profit one.
Yeah, of course.
Last year, you remember the finals existing. There wasn't really much.
God.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it was
brutal,
a blowout.
Did Architect do his Bastion jump onto the chandelier? Was that in the final, or was that
I think
just one of the other playoff
Was
games?
it in the finals?
Was it?
I remember that from like a big game at the end, but I can't remember whether it was the final or not.
Eichenwald's chandelier jump. He went from the cart up to
That was
the
finals.
roof. I don't know.
That's what I'm asking. Was it
Eichenwald was played in the finals.
I don't think
Eichenwald
it
was in the finals, and I believe that actually may have been true, Josh. He may have played Farah on defense and the Bastion on offense.
It was. I've just looked it up. It was the grand finals.
Okay.
I mean, that is the moment that sticks out to me from last year's grand.
That is just styling on them. This one, it was so close at times, and I feel like there wasn't like really any one big like standout moment. I think there was one moment where Ons like really popped off. I forgot what map. I mean, maybe the ending with Super on the Roadhog to win, but it didn't have that,
I think it had a much larger
one more.
density of cool moments.
Cool
so
plays,
that individual ones just don't stand out that much.
That's true, because the first two seasons are blowouts, so you just remember the one or two moments. That's really
we gotta start wrapping, so I'm gonna start.
Can I just say one more play that really stood out for me, which didn't impact the map when you reflect on it, but Violet going up on the roof on Hollywood and surviving with 1 HP.
When he took out the Widow and the Mercy, right?
Yeah, that was 1 HP. 1 HP left after dueling Toby.
That will definitely stand out to people, actually, because again, Violet was like a potential MVP candidate of that match.
Yeah,
and that was one of those moments that was just like, oh my god, this guy's ridiculous.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's talk the final section, the final segment of the episode, which is my player of the week. Kurt, please run the tape. We done yet? No. Presented by T-Mobile. Wow, that's actually...
I heard that one.
Possibly an incredibly disrespectful slide that we recorded.
Was that a long day of recording happening there, Bren?
I can't remember why we recorded that. I mean, because I knew it was recording. I think I thought it would be funny if I just came in and said, "Are we done yet?" But I don't know if it was that funny. I mean, who knows? Did you laugh? Write a comment. My player of the week this week is...
Please laugh.
My player of the week this week is... It's so funny, Johnny, that you led with that moment, because my player of the week is Violet for his performance in the grand finals. I think Violet, he was my vote for the MVP of that match. I think I'm not upset that that Striker ended up getting it, but I thought Violet's play over the course of the entire series was paramount in them shutting down what Seoul were chucking at them. Like Gesture being punished way more. His individual heroics from Violet were just astounding. I think he played really, really, really well, and so that's why he's my player of the week this week.
Oh, that's a good one. Johnny voted for Rascal to be the MVP of the final.
This fucking guy.
You could have voted for that. I think there was an option to vote for Tuyu.
Who did you guys? Who did you guys think was the MVP? I thought it was close between like 2 or 3 players.
Yeah, I went for Striker, but I also at the beginning of the series thought
it was Super at the beginning of the series.
Really? You thought it was Super? Yeah, I mean Super was really good at the beginning.
I thought Super's impact on Hog, like towards the beginning, I thought his Hog was really strong the entire...
The thing is, though, at the beginning, I feel like the biggest Hog difference was that Jesha had a permanent Discord orb on him.
That's also true.
The impact that Violet had throughout the series was not just in terms of his ability, like obviously fantastic, and his clutch moves to Batiste and like the fragging that he's able to do, all fantastic. But the fact that they got value out of him subtly with the Discord orb placements
Yeah.
as well. It just fucking hard countered the Seoul Dynasty.
I still think it was more pronounced though than in the series prior, because when Seoul Shock played the first time around, the same situation where it was Violet playing Zen, and I don't think the Roadhog difference was that pronunciated as it was in this series. Like I think it was really noticeable.
Yeah.
How much better they played around it more, I think, but still,
They
like,
definitely
the
did. Like
difference was there.
I think in the first series, Super kept hooking gesture in and just dying to the nano boosts. Like he would hook gesture and suddenly he's got a nano boost gesture in his face.
Yeah.
And this one, they basically didn't do that at all. They just put a Discord orb on him and they poked him from a distance. Like they would never try and hook him in. They were just poking him from a distance. It was clear, like strategic adaptation. It's the number one thing that the Shock are so fantastic at, is that they just read an opponent and fuck up their play style the second time they play them.
Very, very smart stuff.
It's and it's so interesting how the league is developed in a way to where River season 1, where like Jonak was so dominant like on the Zen, and you're like, well, there's only a few teams that can get away with playing Zen in different comps like this. So like now it's like Violet just casually, right? Just whether it's Zen or even like the going over to Batiste, just dominates a game. I feel like he does it with even like less resources, just kind of like he just does it, you know?
Yeah. I definitely agree. But I did think that Striker was the MVP. Like, I think it was the right finals MVP. The guy pounded on Tracer, like, unbelievably. And then his Hanzo was at least as good as Profits in this final game as well, which is such a huge thing to be able to put out there.
We didn't talk about it at all. Are you guys surprised that they didn't try and profit on Tracer at all?
They tried in the first match, and it didn't work for them.
They did. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it was just like, I'm not disappointed they didn't do it. I think it was just like, they were like, we're not gonna. I was disappointed they didn't try like Ball Tracer at some points. Like they struggled so much on Hollywood, and you can't really do it because of the high ground. It's very hard to play it. But at some point, I think you
should have brought back out the Genji, dude.
Deal with Violet and
Genji pick was-
Man, how did I?
They brought the
Dude, that's
Genji
the
out?
moment from the finals.
Oh, that's-
How did I forget about that?
Genji.
It happened so fast, dude.
That was so good, actually. I loved that.
It was like fucking vintage profit. Just when we were casting, I was like, "The fuck is this?"
Yeah.
I was
So
like, "They
good.
selected Genji." I was
But
like,
it made
"This is
so
gonna
much
be-"
sense strategically. It was brilliant. It was beautiful to watch.
It does, but I was like, "This is just some fucking ballsy pick. Like they're gonna play the fucking Genji against the."
I mean, I
Shock
liked it.
in the
Yeah. It made a
finals.
lot of sense.
The thing, I mean, you also you have to dodge the hook, the accretion, and headshots from all of their snipers. Like it's not a hard counter to the double sniper comp. Like you
No,
have
but
to be
it's-
so good to play
It's very
around the win
effective
conditions of
at taking control of the map compared to like the snipers. Like taking
But
control of blue
still-
box, their snipers can't stand up there when there's a fucking Genji right clicking you.
But
Yeah.
even then, the one of the bigger plays, it was such a sick play actually, was like the last fight when they nanoed Prophet and super hooked him in and killed him.
Yeah, that was enormous.
And then Creative just hit some fucking giga big fucking biotic grenade.
Yeah,
I think it hit
Creative
like 4 or
played well.
5 people.
Red have had a really good, I think, top 4 games. Like the grand finals overall.
He did, yeah. He played
Creative
incredibly
played
well.
really well.
And yeah, the whole season
Yeah.
to rest up for him. Yeah,
It was a bit of a breakout.
performance for sure.
Yeah, breakout performance for Creative. I think, are we ready to wrap? Because I've got a couple of questions for you guys.
Yeah.
I know that we have
Yeah, we
like
have
only
to
5 more
wrap.
minutes.
We have to
But-
Yeah.
wrap soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the last 5 minutes, I've got a question for a couple of you guys. 3 of you guys. Yeah, I'm not expecting Bren to answer. I suppose.
to
but
contribute
says
to
only
the
a couple.
answers.
Yeah, I tweeted that Prophet and Gesture are clearly the best duo of all time after they made the finals, after they beat Shanghai in the lower bracket and they make it to another finals, and Prophet and Gesture are both playing so well.
Yep.
Do you guys agree with that? Do you think Prophet and Gesture are the greatest duo of all time in Overwatch?
Yep.
For now. I think
Yes, now they are.
depending on what goes on with the Shock next year, I think just kind of like they've been so consistent, right? I feel like you kind of have to give it to them, but
Probably
it still kind of
It's not
doesn't
a
feel.
funny question or an answer. It's just like, of course it hinges on the future. There's more history to be written.
Well, I mean,
We're
How
talking
they
about
do.
now,
well,
not
I
in
guess
5
I just give it
years.
to them. I just give it to them now because like we haven't really seen any team or player duos be that consistent in the past.
I think there's a more consistent duo.
for 3
Would you like
years.
to tell us who it is?
Tell us who
Yeah, I
it
was
is.
just letting
Yeah.
the suspense build up before I
Oh.
let it rip. Moth and Violet.
I was gonna say that too.
I think they've been a more consistent, more successful duo.
I was
don't
gonna
think
say
so.
Moth. When
You don't
when
think
he
so,
posed
Johnny?
the question, when he posed the question, the duo I thought of next was Moth and Violet.
I think
Um,
you look at this. They've won. I mean, I say look at this. I've got nothing to back this up other than my words. But they've played 2 finals now, back to back, and they've won them. They've won multiple of the inner tournaments and stage finals together as well, side by side. Compare that to Profit and Gesture. Like, yeah, Profit and Gesture had a bit of a tear up here, and they won 2018 together. But they had a fucking lackluster 2019.
Okay,
Yeah, but-
okay. So this is
They still
contingent on
existed in
counting
20 they still
Overwatch
existed
history or
last
not.
year, though.
Because
you wanna-
2017, they fucked so hard. It was like San Francisco Shock before it was San Francisco Shock. It was unbelievable how good GC Busan was in 2017, and I
Yeah.
will not forget that. So if you want to count Overwatch League duo, yeah, sure, maybe Moth and Violet. But Overwatch history of all time, sorry, buddy, I'm not.
No, it depends
That's
how
the
hard
thing,
you.
though,
I know.
guys, like Moth and Violet haven't had a lackluster year, but they also have only been around for the last 2 years. And
Well, I
like
will say as
2018,
well, it's how
they
much
didn't
you
even play.
weigh the older tournaments, which Johnny is going to weigh super heavily because his livelihood consists on that.
No.
Played them.
I weigh them like equally. You know, if you look at 1965 basketball, obviously those players were way worse than the current ones with like LeBron James and shit. But like, you still have to weigh it in context to how good the players were back then.
Sure.
You know,
I mean, the players were still good back then as well. Like he was beating Haxel Runaway back then.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was not. It was not bad teams that they were rolling around. We're not talking
Well,
2016
What
Overwatch.
was your other question, Eggman?
We got to wrap. No more
Yeah, we gotta
questions.
wrap.
Well, you had
Sorry.
one more question.
Well,
What?
my next question will be good for another episode, I think, because
There
it
you
was
go.
talking,
What is it?
Yeah.
Tease it.
talking greatest of all time. Because I think we're
Oh.
now getting to a position where we can actually start saying who's in the conversation for the GOAT of Overwatch. Like I think
let's do
this
an award show next week.
Post-season award show.
Award show.
All right. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Well, I say that. I mean, yeah. I mean, it has. Yeah, it's been okay. See you next week, I suppose.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.